Kickstarter Games. They're games financed through the crowdfunding platform Kickstarter. This list concept isn't complicated.
I'm gonna talk about my 10 favorites now, and you cannot stop me.
Because I want to focus on IPs birthed through the site itself, I'm gonna say no Kickstarter-funded sequels are eligible for this list. Which includes sequels released under a different name for legal reasons, but doesn't include games just following up on small freeware. And with that out of the way, let's dive into the weird world of the crowdfunded indie industry and the fascinating works of art produced through it. Octodad Dadliest Catch is a humbling story of a loving husband and caring father living his best life. And also he's an octopus pretending to be a human man. Buy groceries, mow your lawn, and spend most of the game in an aquarium for some reason, while escaping the knife-brandishing hunter chef threatening to turn you into sushi. Octodad fits fairly neatly into the short-lived subgenre of wacky meme physics games built for popular Let's Players to pretend to fail at for views and profit. Popularized by Quap, but that really took hold around the early 2010s with such hits as Surgeon Simulator. What makes this one stand out from the pack, however, is a combination of greater mechanical density with how intuitive the controls become and how well they get tested as the difficulty ramps up, with the genuine heart at its core. Octodad is just a guy, you know? Trying to get by and be good to the people around him, but stuck in a world he wasn't designed for. I've seen this described as a metaphor for invisible disabilities and the anxiety caused by hiding them, but even if you don't want to take it that far, almost everyone can relate to the experience of trying to fit in or covering up the struggles of modern life. And Octodad is a cute, surprisingly wholesome take on that idea, alongside being a pretty technically sound game, with plenty of unique challenges developed in each level, including various physics-based minigames and a stealth mission. Dadliest Catch isn't the most complex, creative, or even competent game, but it is a delightful, carefree romp, more than funny and charming enough to justify you paying its low price tag.
Of that subgenre of dark, morality-questioning indie games, Darkest Dungeon is perhaps the most grueling of them all.
This isn't just from the setting, narration, and art style, gorgeous and grim as all of those might be, but mechanically, Darkest Dungeon forces such a cruel, exploitative, and dehumanizing player perspective on the people you encounter, it becomes emotionally exhausting. The game sees you take on the role of a dungeon crawler people manager, recruiting teams of local adventurers and dictating their attacks and some of their decisions while working around each individual fighter's unique strengths and weaknesses. The further they explore, grow in experience, and level up, the more mentally and physically broken they become before they are lost in battle or need to be thrown away and replaced with newer recruits. The level of sheer callousness this forces you to exhibit towards the people you're supposedly allying yourself with is a powerful and nightmarish feeling. Where the game falters, however, which I feel I need to justify for those expecting to see this one later on in the video, is the extent the difficulty and rigidity of mechanics, there is almost always an ideal solution to each problem, undermines the element the morality of the protagonist is in any way a player's choice. And the game needs this art house moral side because treated as a standard dungeon crawler, it's a little too repetitive, grindy, and RNG based to be that enjoyable. Despite that, Darkest Dungeon is a fascinating product, an engrossing mood to explore the eldritch sanity-testing horror of living in England for too long. No, okay, I can explain. Honeypop is a hybrid puzzle game / parody dating sim that transitions into sincere dating sim so smoothly you'll be congratulating yourself for a sweet chain combo before one of the lovely ladies bats you bedroom eyes and you're rewarded with actual uncensored hentai.
But, you know, like, ironically.
The worst part about this is that the puzzle mechanics are actually legitimately pretty good. They're a twist on the classic Match 3 tile games, but with added strategic and resource management elements fitted to their narrative justification of trying to pull off the perfect date. While these games can often end up feeling kind of mindless if you're just doing the same things over and over, having to watch out for your remaining moves, your respective date's preferred and least preferred puzzle tokens, while avoiding broken heart tokens and building up your multiplier, while also trying to set up and execute high point-yielding moves and combos gives it a lot of needed depth. The best mechanic is probably the date gifts. Before each puzzle stage, you get the option of equipping 6 items that can be used at any point throughout the date, and the massive range of effects these have, combined with the strategies opened up in how to use them in conjunction with each other, makes the game incredibly satisfying to replay. The other half of the game is fairly entertaining too. I don't have any other experience with the dating sim genre, Your Honor, but the characters are all pretty well established, if kind of tropey, likeable, and they're voice acted well. My favourite is Audrey, because I fucking hate myself. There's a lot of comedy too that comes with satirizing the more problematic tropes of this kind of media, and the intense sociopathy that would be required to be one of these protagonists in real life. From its characters to its mechanics, Honey Pop is a surprisingly good, surprisingly effective puzzle dating romp, best enjoyed offline, alone, and with the curtains drawn.
On first glance, Avery Attorney might seem to be little more than a dumb Ace Attorney knockoff, but with like birds or something. And while it is certainly that, it's also a lot better and weirder than that premise might first seem.
The game's set in 1848 Paris, on the eve of their third revolution in 60 years, and the art and music is based on what would have been read and listened to in France in the mid-19th century. Art from the anthropomorphic animal caricatures of J.J. Granville, and soundtrack ripped straight from the compositions of Camille Saint-Saëns, most notably 1886's Carnival of the Animals. Whether this is a bold move towards historical accuracy or lazy excuse not to create game assets is up to you. I certainly think it works for the tone of the game's writing, or maybe I was just born in the wrong century, because do Saint-Saëns concertos kind of slap? The setting and characters also really work. The dynamic between your protagonist J.J. Falcon and his assistant Sparrowson is continually entertaining, and fans of silly animal puns will have a lot to, dig their claws into. I almost don't want to discuss the story because I'm guessing most people watching haven't played this one, and there are loads of excellent twists as early as the first hour I really don't want to spoil. Avery Attorney manages to replicate the feeling of Ace Attorney's world being a crooked, collapsing legal system with the instability present in a society on the brink of revolution. I like that it doesn't shy away from the class dynamics of this either. Lawyers are a sort of free agent with their allegiance to an economic class, and the game uses this to allow a lot of player choice in the kind of lawyer you want Falcon to be. Even before the game properly starts, you can choose to decline your first case sent to you by a local aristocrat. So I suppose you intend on defending Dame Kathleen in court? I think not, Sparrowson. The fate of a fat cat bourgeois is none of my concern. Pass the Cabernet Sauvignon already, and then you just play blackjack because this game's great. To get the most out of this one, you'll probably need to be into both text-heavy visual novels and modern European history, but if you fall into that very specific cross-section, definitely check this one out. The 3D open-world platformer collectathon genre was one of my favourites that has sadly fallen out of fashion in recent years, with only a small handful in the last decade.
And if the Kickstarter-backed ukulele wasn't enough to scratch that itch, which you know it probably wasn't, Gears for Breakfast's A Hat in Time will surely do that job.
Taking inspiration from the best of the early 3D classics, most of all Mario Sunshine, Banjo-Kazooie, and Psychonauts, A Hat in Time aims to recreate the feel of romping around an energetic digital playground, with the addition of so much charm and creativity it's hard to keep track. What really sets this one apart from similar games is how much it's willing to experiment with its own structure and world building. You'll be taking on missions in an episodic Sunshine-like structure one second, and zooming around, completing tasks non-linearly in an open-world environment the next. One world is structured around a series of contracts with a soul-snatching demon, and another sees you thrown into an outlandish battle between two directors aiming to win an industry award. The non-stop energy is perfectly complemented by the cartoon-like comic moments, with just a smidge of edge built upon by the irresistible charm of the game's cast of characters, and appeal of all of the alternate hats, costumes, recolors, and I suddenly like the game a whole lot more now. Being a pretentious nitpicker though, and also because being honest the standards for this countdown were higher than I anticipated, I should point out there are just a few flaws that hold it back from truly matching its genre inspirations and the top 5 of this list. The camera isn't great, and I think the game's leniency in how far you can miss a jump but still not be punished does dampen the potential satisfaction from the pure platforming elements, which, having removed the more interesting structural and world-building experimentation, are easily the worst parts of the game. Also, while the game is funny, more effort to tie the locations together and give these environments a sense of internal logic would have probably gone a long way.
These are only worth mentioning, however, because the heights the game reaches in its best moments, Murder on the Owl Express, the perfect level design of Alpine Skyline, and everything about the Snatcher, make these minor foibles seem more apparent.
Even then, A Hat in Time is a jam-packed bundle of fun with a bow on top, or a hat, I guess. One of the best 3D platformers of the last decade, and a tremendous feat for the fledgling developers behind it, for which I'll be watching with a very close eye for their future projects. Shovel Knight. I know why it's great. You know why it's great. I know why it's great.
Everything glowing I could say about this one has undoubtedly been said before, but what the hell, let's say it again anyway.
Shovel Knight is Yacht Club Games' 2014 modern retro instant classic, borrowing mechanics from half a dozen NES games and combining them with newer elements and a few original ideas to brew a concoction far exceeding the sum of its parts. Here gives us the 8-bit era as its most nostalgic defenders remember it and recreates the experience those classics aspired to be. From its platforming to combat, extra challenges to character interactions, Shovel Knight just feels good to play, and that pure gaming satisfaction is compounded by how continually creative and well executed every level and boss fight is. The design philosophy of the best classic platformers is all present and more refined than they ever were, expanding and compounding concepts as levels grow, and this incredibly organic sense of progression built through level design that makes it feel as if you're working your way through a real physical space. Be it a mad scientist laboratory, an active volcano lair, or an airship as it glides through the sky. Boss battles are equally satisfying and built around the moveset of your character while still maintaining a sense of moveset coherence based on their design and the world they inhabit. And what's even more impressive is how comprehensively Yacht Club Games made good on all of their initial stretch goal promises, on top of an already complete game to add multiple new campaigns, additional modes, or the ability to gender bend every character, to make the story as gay as you'd like, which owns. Shovel Knight's story is the standard hero's journey with a couple of twists, and the moveset most reminiscent of older 8-bit titles. But from that point, you get 3 totally unique playstyles with their own narrative and design themes throughout. My personal favourite being the bouncy and bombastic Plague Knight, whose story and moveset aim to flip the ideas established in the base story on their head. I was surprised this ended up so low on the list, given I'm really struggling to find anything to say against it, and just how much fun it is to experience. Even listening to the soundtrack as I write this is making me want to go back and do another Plague of Shadows run. It's an absolutely model platformer, extremely complete package, and paragon of the genre that will likely be studied by game designers for years to come.
There just happen to be 4 games funded from the same website that connect with my tastes and sensibilities that little bit more.
Lisa the Painful is a lot. It's a follow-up to the short and free RPG Maker title Lisa, now redubbed Lisa the First, where you experience the headspace of the titular character trying to escape the sexual and emotional abuse at the hand of her father through her dreams, but where her memories and damage follow her everywhere. The game ends with her mental state fully breaking down and her implied suicide, something made explicit in the title screen of The Painful. There, you take on the role of Lisa's brother, Brad, now all grown up, dealing with the physical and mental abuse from the same man and the person it's turned him into, combined with his guilt at feeling that he'd failed to protect his sister long ago. Unlike its RPG Maker origin point, Lisa the Painful is set in a real physical environment to explore the emotions and themes of trauma and abuse at the heart of this series, with a far greater clarity because it allows us to see how Brad chooses to act within the world around him. The setting of a recent apocalypse adopted for this title is used less as a genre setting and more as a means to reveal the character of Brad Armstrong through the mechanics of a turn-based RPG, with the long-term effects of his abuse and trauma becoming painfully, disturbingly apparent. And you might think this game would be dark, and you'd be right, it goes to some grueling places and touches unavoidably horrific subject matter. But it's also surprisingly funny, with iconic and lovable characters aplenty, largely in the vast set of potential party members you can pick up along your way. You've got Nern, who's like what would happen if you took the internet away from one of those boomer wife guy cartoonists. Or the insufferably wholesome Lord of the Tutorial, Terry Hintz. But my favourite has got to be the shifty fish lawyer himself, Harvey Alabaster. Let's see special moves. Restraining order. Legally convince the enemy to stop attacking you. Brackets. May cause paper cuts. No, it's good. Suppose it might. Alright, level up. The law always wins. I love him so much.
What makes Lisa the Painful work isn't just the humor and dark themes, but how well it ties these into the world building and mechanical RPG aspects to sell us the idea of how this broken man conceptualizes the cruelty and absurdity of the world around him.
Just as you can't escape your own mind entering into a dream, you can't escape your own perspective on the world as you interact with it. The blurred lines between what the society has become since it fell apart, how Brad understands it, and the clearer elements of Brad's drug-fueled delusions really heightens the emotional thrust of the narrative, culminating in the abject horror and monstrosity of the final moments you can't help but feel a little complicit in. The subject matter covered makes Lisa the Painful difficult to casually recommend, but it's a storytelling and mechanical masterpiece that has stuck with me at least as one of my favourites since reaching the end credits. To slow down the pace of this video, let's explore something a little more mellow. It's got cats, crime, the nihilism of societal decay inherent to a late-stage capitalist economy, and also foxes. Night in the Woods is a delight from start to finish. Being lighter on pure gameplay than any other in this countdown bar the visual novel, what makes Night in the Woods shine is almost entirely in its world and writing. The story is pretty lighthearted, with a slightly sardonic edge as you explore your sleepy hometown choosing between childhood friends to hang out with, but slowly grows into heavier and darker subject matter with a splattering of charged emotional and tragic moments. It places you within a short pocket of the life of Mae Borowski as she moves back in with her parents after dropping out of college because of mental health. Which might explain why it especially connected with me personally playing it after just having moved back to the country to my parents after dropping out of university, but the general feelings of nostalgia, decay, and ennui the experience captures are fairly universal. There's a kind of Lovecraftian tone present throughout as you and the town's many inhabitants struggle with confronting the reality that you, and even the potential future of the town itself, cannot escape the influence of structural forces causing its collapse. It's present in Mae's dissociative nightmares, the hangouts with B, the game's ultimate antagonists, and also smaller side stories happening throughout. Like the conflict between Pastor K attempting to use the church to house an out-of-work homeless man and the town council, where the latter's devotion to the supremacy of capital blinds them to the human compassion actually required to rebuild what they fear they've lost. A community. Which, like in Mae's most destructive psychological episodes, tear down the relations of meaning that bond us to each other and instead reduce the world to shapes. Just shapes. Night in the Woods holds its leftist politics on its sleeve, which only benefits the socio-political satire drenching the world. It's a game about reclaiming meaning that acknowledges the way that we will do that is the only way we can. Together. And it meant the world, to me at least, that this story about attaining power in a society that strips it away from us ended not with some individualistic display of singular great strength, but a small commitment made to your father, who you'd seen struggling with shitty working conditions throughout the story, that you'd join him at his next picket. On an unrelated note, solidarity with Kickstarter United.
You might be surprised that such a small, short, and mechanically simple game, it's literally just platforming around a small town, talking to people, and a handful of simple minigames, placed so highly on here, and to be honest, I was pretty surprised how much this resonated with me, but it's only because of how smoothly and holistically it ties together everything it was trying to do.
Everything from the minimalist art style, atmospheric music, and funny, charming, sweet, raw, no-holds-barred essence each line of dialogue drips with creates a game that hits slow but hits hard where it needs to, and affected me at least more deeply than I'd perhaps like to admit. Anyone who follows this channel would know I love me a good Metroidvania. And while both franchises the genre was named for have mostly shied away from the gameplay they popularized in recent years, that mantle has been very well taken up within the indie scene, with games like Cave Story, Dust, Guacamelee, and the best exploration of 2D exploration-based action platforming adventure the medium has possibly ever seen, Hollow Knight. Where to even begin? Hollow Knight is one of the simply best new IPs of recent years that blends cathartic action gameplay with such an organic sense of discovery that stays throughout your adventure as you grow in strength and slowly familiarize yourself with ever more of its gorgeous, captivating world. Like A Hat in Time and Shovel Knight, Hollow Knight borrows a lot of mechanics from older games that inspired it. The movement options of Mega Man X, the exploration loops of Super Metroid, and the badge system from Paper Mario. But what separates it is its willingness to adapt all of these around its unique creative vision, reinventing where it borrows from and adding many more ideas that are totally new yet so ingenious. Such as how the upgrade The Dream Nail serves doubly to flesh out the lore by digging into the psyche of minor characters while providing this really interesting risk-reward element within boss fights, or how map completion and post-death states are both designed to constantly incentivize exploration while keeping the world mysterious and alien on first playthroughs. Pair that with the genuinely stunning world and music design and it becomes a title I can sink whole afternoons or evenings into without noticing the time pass. This too is aided by the fantastic world design and how subtly it introduces and brings you into the larger areas. The obvious standout being the City of Tears, one of the best built up, best introduced areas in a Metroidvania, and cements it as genuinely one of the greatest levels in a video game I've ever seen.
What's most impressive about this game is how much of its design, both in aesthetic and in gameplay, manages to be both totally fresh and incredibly well designed.
This sense of relentlessly satisfying exploration is true of the story as well, where the long history of conflicts and fallen civilizations, which is mostly told through background details and the implications of its flowery prose, all being subtle enough that multiple careers on YouTube have emerged just in explaining the game's lore. This could be criticized as being overly vague or pretentious, but to me only complements the sense of discovery at its core, just like acquiring a new spell, finding a new charm, or discovering an overworld shortcut. Piecing together the story from offhand dialogue or noticing the remnants of some recent event in the background is its own sense of accomplishment, where each player's experience of it becomes unique, and the game is all the more engaging for that. I doubt this video will be the last time I bring Hollow Knight up. Of every game on this list, this is the one I've put by far the most hours into, and I haven't even mentioned the bosses, DLC, or Zote. And I fully intend, however it turns out, to cover its upcoming sequel whenever it finally releases, but for now I'll just say, play this game.
Hollow Knight shows AAA devs the world over the correct way to leave a game at launch full of bugs. Because they're the characters.
Despite everything, I still like Undertale. Guys, I'm sorry. This little fucking dog, bro. The only entry in which you can date a skeleton, weirdest fandom in show, and most obvious choice for ending this countdown, Undertale is pretty damn good. On the off chance that you've been living under a rock since 2015, here is a new take on the classic RPG, one where nobody needs to get hurt. The mechanics and structure of your traditional turn-based adventure are retooled into a world where every interactable character and enemy is a potential friend, which you are encouraged to deal with non-violently. This mechanic isn't completely original, but what sets Undertale apart is the added weight given from your conflicting incentives. Violence is mechanically incentivized through level-ups preparing you for later areas, and pacifism is emotionally incentivized through how charming the game's writing is, alongside how relentlessly iconic every single character interaction, flavor text, and interactable boulder sequence somehow manages to be. A lot of elements, like its inconsistent sprite style and 2-hour soundtrack that's just 5 melodies in a trench coat, have been harshly criticized by objective game critics.
Video games, they tell us, are supposed to immerse, and Undertale a lot of the time is doing the exact opposite, constantly reminding players it is a work of art spoken through a single creator. But I think in a lot of ways this is why it works.
The simple emotionality and consistent style of comedy across all characters, combined with the extent that both the emotional and comedic aspects require a level of player interaction with them to land, means the game connects less like watching a sitcom and more like an intimate evening catching up with an old friend. And this all in turn makes the final thematic point at the heart of the Genocide run, the reveal that the true conflict of Undertale is less about any given character and more about the relationship between the player and the medium itself, all the more powerful and affecting. The perfect relatable comedic style absolutely shines, with lines like, "Really not feeling up to it right now, sorry. I'm 19 and have already wasted my entire life," or a personal favorite, "I love doing team attacks with you." This game gives us wholesome mini-bosses. It's what the world needed, and it didn't even know it. But it's not just the humor elements that are memorable, there are a ton of extremely effective dramatic and emotional beats that land just as hard. Such as the build-up to Asgore, this bundle of tragic contradiction that slowly unravels the further you progress. The fight with Undyne the Undying. This incredibly sweet conversation told through background flavor about two monsters who long to see the sky. And the one line that can bring me chills whenever I read it: despite everything, it's still you. It's my favourite game to come from Kickstarter, but it's also the best Kickstarter game, as it's the perfect symbol of a product so focused, complete, and nuanced it would require years of dedicated work to complete, but like others in this video, is so weird and experimental, you can't imagine it being greenlit by a risk-averse major publisher seeking only safe returns. And like many others, it's not hard to see it as a pitch being shot down early. This won't do, it's too eccentric, it's too subversive. Hey, is that Bejeweled next to Catgirl hentai? You know, get the fuck out of my office. The fandom is a lot of what Undertale is known for in 2021, being that it was pretty toxic and obnoxious in places. But for a game that is so charming, that plays off such relatable feelings, and that relates those feelings to its audience in such an oddly interpersonal way, it's not surprising the community grew so quickly and went into such bizarre and obsessive directions so hard. It's a game that seems to want deeply to connect with people, and while it happened to accomplish that on a broader scale than maybe any indie game had done before, I don't think that takes away from the magnitude of its impact on every individual player who got something out of their journey through the underground. I'm fighting off tears listening to the soundtrack as I write this, recollecting the intense catharsis of feeling seen, feeling understood by a work of art to a degree that for me personally only one other game has accomplished. But more than simple understanding, what I think allows this game to become so compelling is its willingness to challenge the player directly, primarily through the final run most will complete, to move on, grow, and be better.
I wasn't at a great place in my life at the end of 2015, and I don't want to make this segment about that, but I think at that point I needed a game like Undertale, and I'm eternally grateful I had the chance to play it then.
I've thought for 5 years about how I want to eventually talk about this one beautiful game in a variety of since-scrapped video ideas, but ultimately always held back. Because I was afraid of messing it up. Like I'd miss the point, fail to capture why I found it so special, or worse, embarrass myself through cringeworthy indulgent emotionality. But this is a game that will always mean a lot to me, and if Fox's work has forced me to learn anything, corny as it might sound, when it comes to risking vulnerability to facilitate the types of human connection that make life worth living, it's always better to try and fail. Thanks for watching this video. It took a lot out of me given how many of the games happen to fall within my absolute favourites, and I wanted to make sure I did them justice, which hopefully I did. And in the spirit of moving forward support for indie gaming, I'll leave links in the description to 2 projects I'm currently following. Crowsworn is a stylish steampunk Metroidvania with an art style clearly inspired by Hollow Knight, not that that's a bad thing by any means. And Zappling Bygone is an alien action platformer where you take on the abilities of lost creatures by wearing their skulls. And if you want to support me, any donations on patreon.com are much appreciated. Ta-ta, and see you next time.